Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're in Masechtas Nazir daf Samach Gimel. We're going to begin on the very top of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph by the new Mishnah. Says the Masnisa, Nazir Shigilach. So you have a Nazir that shaved, as the Mefarish says, Tigalachas Tahara, that he was completely pure. B'yom Shloish v'echad Shloi. So he finished his 30 days, he did everything, but noidalo shehu tameh. And then he was informed after all is said and done that he actually became tameh. The Mefarish says, but tumas mace. See, he actually became tameh mace. And it doesn't matter. Ben shenitma b'taich molois, ben shenitma le'ach molois. It doesn't matter if he became tameh be in the middle of his Nazirus, or even after he stopped counting, provided kaidim shehevi karbanaisav u'shigilach. So we're going to end up saying that it's going to be a machlokus, but according to this, it's all totally on if he completed it all. If he completed it all, then that's one thing. However, if, let's say, he at some point became tummy mace, even though, again, after this all happened after the fact, he realized this is what happened, so he's potentially going to be Seiser all of his Nazirus. But it depends. So in this, the Chiddush of the Mishnah is as follows. Im Tumiyadua Seiser. If it's a Tumiyadua, in other words, that there was a dead body, everyone could see it, it's pretty obvious, so then it will be Seiser all of his Nazirus. Says the Mefarish, Haisa b'shah shenitma harizeh Seiser esakol aval lo nitma ad li'achar havas kavanaisav afil b'tumiyadua eno Seiser l'zayin. We know that if it's after Molois and he and before he brought the karbanos, so in that situation, since again this is talking about he may have done giluach, but he hasn't brought the karbanos, so then we mentioned before that it's not Seiser Sakoil, it's only Seiser Zayin, 7 days, because he completed everything. As we saw previous on Daf Mem Zayin, Mafar says, Mishin Israel love Echamin Hadamim, V'okamina B'Gemar U'Ladivri Hakol Zayin Seiser Sulo. That once you did Zrikas Hadamim on one of the karbanos, that's it. So even though you became Tameh after that, then the din is that it's only Seiser 7 for 7 days. Now, the Chiddush is the following. Im tumas tahoim eno seiser. If it's a tumas tahoim, which means it is something which is not clear, that's not seen, we'll see exactly what that means, then it's not seiser. Even though you became tameh mace, which is an unbelievable Chiddush, but by tumas tahoim, there's a halach Moshe Messinai that tells us the din is that it's not going to be seiser in your Nazirus. Says Taisus, so he says, Ezuhi tumas tahaim she'in echad me'olam akira. It has to be, as the Gemara is going to also say, no one ever knew about it. It's basically a mace that no one knows it's there, let's say. However, if people know that this mace is there, but you didn't know about it, that's not considered to be tahaim, like in the depths. So, im ad shula, the Gemara is going to talk about this, the Mishnah actually, im ad shula gilach, benkach avenkach seiser. If, let's say, you didn't yet do gilach, you haven't shaven yet, so this is clear that it's ma'akev, the giluach, the shaving is part of the process that is ma'akev the Nazirus, so therefore it's seiser. Now Ketzad. Ketzad says the Mefarish, he tumas latahoyim shenu seiser. What is a case where we find that you will not be seiser in the Nazirus because it's considered to be tahoyim, like hidden? So yard litval mamar. So let's say you have this person, and they go into a cave, which means they go into a cave to immerse themselves in its water. The nimsa may safa al panei hamara, and it turns out that there was a mace that was floating on the top of this cave. So tameh. So since the body was floating on the top, so it's considered to be a tumiyadua. It's obvious. It's right there. So therefore, it will be seiser. However, nimsa mashuka bekarka hamara. What if the mace was actually mashuka, was buried in the earth? It was not visible at all. So then it depends. Yarid l'haker tar. If the reason why you went in there to begin with is just to cool off, namely, you really are tahor, and you just went in there because you wanted to cool off by going to this water. So we say, since you were tahor, we're going to assume that you're tahor in this case, which is, again, the chiddush that in this situation, because it's tumas tahaim, so the din is that if you were tahor, we're going to say that you remain tahor. L'tahir matumas meis tame. But if you taka were tame meis and you went into that water to be part of the purification process of like going into a mikveh, so then you're telling me why? Shecheskes tame tame v'cheskes tahar tahar shirgaim l'davar. So what you were is what you are. Says the Mefarsh, Shibishah shenichnas lo hayatzaf. If at the time you went in there and the body was not floating, but it was submerged, Bezu yesh chiluk, that's why there is a distinction. Pamim shu tahar, pamim shu tameh. Kishenichnas l'sham. V'im nichnas ba el lehaker. He only went in there to cool off. V'noidel l'achar giluach. After you shaved, you found out shnimsel l'sham meis mashuka keneged pi hama'ara. There was actually a dead body that at the time was on the bottom. Harizet tahar dezuhi tumas hatahoim. This is the chiddush of tumas hatahoim. So look in Taisus over here. She says bishvil tumas sheretz. So let's say a person went in there to be toivel b'mara because of tumas sheretz. V'nimsa kazayis min ames saf al pnei hamara, and he ended up again seeing this body was floating. Safek im haya kazayis min ames. The safek, it was a kazayis min ames b'toy hamara b'shash taval v'ha'ahil. It's possible there's oil tuma, or shemaloha yasham b'shash taval tame. Even in the case that we're not sure if it had the requisite amount of kazayis, we still say them their tame. Why? The savik tuma b'shos yachid sveko tame. Even though it's not for sure that this mace had the minimum amount to become tame through oil hatuma, but because it's a suffix, we say, since you were in a mara and a rishus yachid sveko tame. B'im noidelo v'il achash gilach tame. If you knew about it even after you shaved your tame, v'lo amrinan av ki ha kazayis min ames toicha mara b'shasha tavel yehe tahar b'shum tumas hatahoim. We don't say, oh, because of tumas tahoim it's okay. The kivan de'in she'ein shum davar mechaseh alav havilei ketuma yedua. So this is coming to tell us an important chiddush. It's not talking about a situation where it's we have l'chayra. This is what it's saying. What Tosfos is telling us, this great chiddush, is that it doesn't mean that if you 100% became tamei mace that you're still tahar. Because why? The point is that even though normally say suffik b'rishus yachid suffik tamei, but if this mace again may or may not be a kazayis, but it was tumas tahoim, so then we say that you remain tahar. Okay. So again, that's it's totally if you went in there and it was mashuka b'karka, so that's tumas tahoim. But if you went in there just to cool off, the chiddush is that you're tahar from tumas mace. Now, why? The reason is because it's a suffix. So suffix b'rishus yachid, even though normally we say suffix tahar, but we say that since you were becheskes tahar, we keep you as tahar, which again is the chiddush dafka by a tumas tahoim. So says the Gemara, min hanimili. So how do we know this din? So Omar Belezer Diamarko, the pasuk says, and the pasuk says in its entirety, the chiyamos meis ol befeta pitam. When someone dies suddenly in your presence, the timei, and the Nazir becomes tamei. Rosh nizra v'gilach roisha b'yom taharasai. He has to shave his hair. B'yom hashvi yigalchenu. On the seventh day he shaves. So the pasuk says, "V'chi yamos meisalo b'feta pitam alav b'machveres loy." It's talking about that something which is clear to him, something clear to him. It says the Mefarish, "B'vurura lo kigon tuma yadua seiser aval lo al tuma she'eni yadua." So the fact this pasuk is talking about where the mace is very clearly identifiable, that's when the pasuk applies, when the person becomes tamei and it's seiser and everything, but it's only because it's a tumah yadua. Reish Lakish Aimer Omerkra, he uses a different pasuk. The second pasuk, taken also in Bamidbar bin Perik Tes, said Daber el bnei Yisrael more ishish ki yeh tamei lenefesh o b'derech hachok lachem l'doraseicha v'yosef pesach Hashem. So he uses the pasuk regarding someone who became tamei, and therefore he cannot bring the carbon pesach. So therefore, there's a din of pesach sheni. So the pasuk says like this: Ki yeh tamei lenefesh o b'derech hachok, or if you're far away, ki derech. So we learn it's just like a road. Ma derech begiloi af koil begiloi. So too, it has to be something which is out in the open and clear. However, if it's not something out in the open and clear, so then that's considered to be tumas tahoim. Okay. Now, before we go further, let's look at this Taisus. Taisus of Meshuka Bekarka. So he says as follows. Shechesas tamei tamei, shiraglayim l'davar, koloimer, shetam gadol yesh loimar. So says Taisus the first wide line. Shiraglayim, koloimer, shetam gadol yesh loimar, hoyel v'hu becheskas tumas meis. Since this person has a chazak of tumas meis, lo hutrak tumas hatahoim etzla. So we're not going to be mako when it comes to tumas tahoim. But hadinaka bereish yard lit boil. Says Taisus, why does it mention the case that he went to immerse? It was safe yard lahaker, and then it mentions the case of he went to cool himself. So again, according to the Mishnah, if he went in lahaker, it just says he's tahar straight up. So yesh litin tam ladavar, the Reisha rebusa kamashmon. The Reisha is coming to tell us a chiddush that he was yard litbol, that he went in to immerse in a cave. Af ki yard litboil, even though he went in there to immerse, the mastama dikdek v'ayin hetev, probably if he's going to immerse there, he's going to first investigate the waters clearly. Shlotehe tumas savivov. He obviously, if he wants to go into a mikvah to be matar himself, he wants to make sure there's no mace around, because that would not serve the purpose of his purity. So you think he checked the nimsa mace safal al pihamara, and then it turns out that there was this mace that was submerged. Mikol makam tame mishum safek tuma bi rishus yachid. So the chiddush is, even though you would think, since he checked the matter very clearly, so you would think maybe it's not even maybe a status of safek, nonetheless we still say safek tuma b'rishus yachid, he's still tame. But safe when it comes to him cooling off, Rebus Kamashman ki av ki yard l'haker, even though he's just going in to cool off, the Indarka livdaik, since you're just going to cool off, you don't really care, you're not thinking about, your mind is not becoming tahar, being tame, uladakdek saviva, you're not really checking your surroundings, mikol makam, ki meshuka bakarka, hamara tahar mishum dehabi tumas atahayim. So this is the chiddush. Question 13 says, again, ma rabusa. So the first one is talking about even when you went into the mikvah, to this cave to lit boil, so you would think in this situation that, let's see, how does he write over here? Madua ein kad halacha de tumas t'tayim l'tahir. Says kivan de tuma safa ve'en mechusa, it's floating havile ketuma yedua. Kashwan de afgav the yard lit boil. The chiddush is even when to be toivel to mastama diktik v'ayin heitev savivav shalot tehei tuma mikol makam tami mishum sfeika savik tuma b'rishus yachid. Which is again this the point of Taisus, an important chiddush that Taisus brings down over here. Okay. So again, we have these two inyanim about the notion of tuma of tumas tahoim. So, we can see there that just like our Mishnah talks about Nazir, the same din of Tumas Tahoim also applies to Pesach, to the carbon Pesach. Okay, so now let's continue with the Gemara. Vela Haditanan, we learn as follows: Ezuhi Tumas Tahoim, Kol Sheina Makira Echad Misayf Olam. So this is not our Mishnah, but nonetheless we learn elsewhere that Tumas Tahoim is someone that is a situation where no one ever recognized that there was a mace there. If someone knew about it, so that's not tumas tahoim. Says Okay, weiter. So Bishul Mamandi Emer Ki Derech, which has to do with the case of checking that your surroundings, you're traveling on a road, and your road is something which is clear to everyone. So shaper. So that is good. Elomandi Emer b'machveres lo ki makir echa b'sava oilo mayhavi. It says that it's something which is clear to you. So what's the difference if other people can see it or knew about it? L'chayra, it's not totally on everyone knowing, like on a road, but it's something which is specific to you. So if we look in the Mafarish, Mishloman de Maki Derech de Begiloi Shapir, Givan de Echad Makira Besova Olam Havigiloi. Even one person sees, that's it. But the other one, Amai Havitame Ha'enu Machveres Lo. It's for him, the Nazir only is the only one that will should matter. Question number 1, the Sue. Furthermore, says the Gemara, Ha Desanya Hamaitzi Mace. The person finds a mace, Mushka Vlorchava Shalderech, and the mace encompass the entire width of the road. Basically, the only way you could traverse over that road is by going over this mace. So, Betruma Tame. When it comes to the dinim of Truma, the din is your Tame, because we do not apply the din of Tumas Tahoyim by Truma. But Nazir, V'yasiyas Pesach Tahar. So, Maishna. So, just stop. What's the reason? Why do we make this distinction? On this, the Mafar says this question is not specific to one of the opinions. It's actually about both of them. Since there's a din of Tumas Tahoyim, so then why are we making it a distinction between a Nazir and a Pesach that you're Tahar? Why, and then why, when it comes to the din of Truma, is it Tameh? So Ella Tumas Tahoyim Gamra Gemira law. So it's a halacha Moshe Messinai. That's it. It's a halacha Moshe Messinai. So that's the reason why, says the Mafarish, Te'enu metama, when it comes to Nazir and Pesach, v'halcha gemir the Nazir v'yosef Pesach bilvad in metama. So the reason why is just that's the reality. When it comes to Truma, it's still Tameh. Halach Moshe Messinai is specifically to Nazir and Asiyas Pesach. How does that answer the first question? Let's see. Does Taisus discuss this? No. Okay, but it's a halach Moshe Messinai. So therefore, the halach Moshe Messinai l'chayra is telling us that even if you hold machveres lo, it doesn't literally mean it's clear to you. It's because otherwise that's a huge nafkamina. He obviously is in agreement to the statement of a tumas tahoyim is koshin makir echa b'sava oila. Okay, and that's through halach Moshe Messinai. Even though the pasuk of kiyet tamei, the pasuk of chiyomos mesel befet the pitam alav. So it sounds like it's only him, but it's not exclusive to him. Okay. So it says the Gemara. So he said, this is all totally that this took place before the shaving. Now, a lot of people say shaving is not ma'akev. So Mantana Rabbi Yochanan must be Rabbi Lezer. Because he holds that this taka is ma'akev. Okay? Ma'akev what? Says Taisus Melishtos B'yayin. For you can't drink wine until you do the giluach. The Rabbanan di'emer tegulachas in makeves. According to the Rabbanan, they don't require im kain achash nizar kadam enolav oid taras nazir. Once you do zrikas adam on one of the karbonos, as we saw in the Mafarish, that's it. Boy rami barcham. So that's the kasha. Nitma b'toich molois. Let's say you became tummy b'toich molois. In other words, during the times you're counting as a nazir, those days. V'nodel acham molois. But you only found out about it after the molois. Mahu. What is the din? Basi yadiyah azlinan. Do we say that we go basi yadiyah? The yadiyah achar moloisi, and therefore it happened afterwards. We'll see what that means. Odom olo. Okay. Fine. Hold off on that. So let's look in the Mafarish. So he says like this. So let's see this Mafarish Rebbe Lezer. So in Perik Gimel Minin, we saw Daf Mem Vav. Ve'achar yishteh Nazir yayin. Only afterwards, achar maisim kulon divrei Rabbi Eliezer. You have to do everything, including giluach. The kivan diadayin. Well, giluach, since he didn't shave yet, commission noidelo b'toich malois dami. It's considered like he knew b'toich malois. So seiser as a koil. The chiddush is the seiser as a koil. Okay, fine. So on this, Rambam Marcham asks a question. But tumas tahoim. Let's say you became tummy with tumas tahoim b'toichim malois while you were counting. V'nodelo achar malois. But you found out it after you counted. However, kaidim havas karbanaisav. The kaidim giluach. You found out before you shaved, also before you brought any of the karbanos. Mahu basu yediaz linan kleimer mi amrinan. The hadigar minam tumas tahoim eno soiseres. That tumas tahoim is not soiser heichadia dia havu achar malois. Maybe that's only after malois. Afilu heicha de nitma. Even when you became tummy during the counting. Since you became tummy during that time, even though you found out afterwards, even after you brought the karbanos, maybe in this case it is soiser. So we're asked, Mister, are you trying to tell me that the question is whether it's going to be soiser? So we continue Samach Gimel Mem Beis, Amarav Tashma. So he says, Im ad shelo gilach, if let's say he didn't shave yet, bein kach or bein kach soiser. It says it's going to be soiser no matter what. So heichadami dis yada le b'toich maloi srichel meimar. If you knew about it while you were counting, there's no chiddush. El avdulach maloi shma minan, which is how we kind of established the case of the Mishnah. The adayin tiboilach. I can still ask you a question. So therefore, we see clearly it is soiser. The adayin tiboilach kulu soiser or shiva soiser. Is it soiser the entirety, or is it only for 7? Because after malois, if you become tummy after malois, you only tell me 7 days. So over here, since you found out about elach malois, so maybe you also only have to do 7 days. Uman ilay mal rabbanan pshita the kul soiser. We know according to rabbanan it's definitely soiser. Il Rabbi Eliezer, because according to Rabbi Eliezer, kolach malois shiva soiser. He holds after malois. It's only 7 days. That's only because you came tamei afterwards. Vahai lifnei maloisu. This person became tamei before. Odilma shanihacha diadia achmaloisi. Since the idea happened afterwards. Umina katani benkach saiser vulkamifagi. So we see from here that in either situation there's saiser, it says, and they don't argue. So again, the question was, if he became tamei and knew about it before malois, we said before, that's pshita at saiser. Rather, this case is that he knew about it only afterwards, and it's also saiser. Tanabanan. Hamoitze mace mutal or chavashel derech. So in the situation where you have a mace that is on the road, so as we said, quoted this before, latruma tamei, as halach Moshe Sinai that we say regarding truma, it's tamei. But Nazir v'oisa Pesach tar. So the chiddush, the halach Moshe Sinai of tumas tahoim is by Nazir and oisa Pesach. So b'medaber morim shenlo makom la'avor. The only time we say this is there's nowhere to pass. In other words, the mace encompasses and takes the entirety of the road. If there is room to pass, so it's shaykh to say maybe you actually did not become tamei. Maybe you actually walked over the path or the part where the mace was not. So therefore, the whole problem, even by truma, to say that this mace, which is a tumas tahom, is only in a situation where it encompasses the whole road. But there's even a way of getting out of it because there's space to, again, go through, then it's okay. B'medaber murim shimatsu shalim. It's only in the event that the body is complete. Of a mashubra mafurik. However, let's say it's broken or severed. So I feel ein makom la'avar, even if there is not enough place to travel, chayshinan shema bin pirkin avar. So we say, even if there is nowhere to walk, so in that situation, we're concerned maybe ben pirkin avar, maybe you traveled between these between the that which was severed. Uvekever, however, if we're dealing with an actual grave site, then a fil mishum maforik tame. We say by a kever we're strict that even if we're dealing that the body has been broken, we still say you're tame mipnei shekever mitzarfo, because the kever combines it all. Okay, so before we go further, let's look at question 14. Hamaitz mace mutal or chava shel derech be'el ufanim tar afil truma. When are you tahar? Even by truma. So im yesh makom la'amor shelo b'derech hameis, if there's a way to travel, or mace meshubrim maforik. We said if the mace, the body is broken, so then we're going to be lenient in that situation as well, which is exactly the question TA 8, which asks the same question. So same answer, TA 8. Okay. Okay. We'll do the next. Well, after we finish this, we'll get to the last question. So that's the din by a kever. The only time we may be lenient is in a situation where you're walking, because when you're walking, you can walk straight. If let's say you're carrying a package, or rochiv, you're riding a donkey or like tame, even if there may be a small path you can go through, and the mace, these parts of the mace is right nearby, so you can say, okay, I didn't lean over to that part. But not when we're dealing with carrying a heavy package or an animal. It's possible when you're walking, you can walk straight, and therefore you're not doing any movement. Therefore, you didn't create movement, which of the bones. You didn't touch them, and you also didn't go over them. However, if you're carrying something heavy in which you're shifting back and forth as an animal, it's impossible. It's an interesting language, but it's basically saying that if there's just a small amount of space that you could have walked, but since you're dealing with carrying a package, you must have moved from side to side. The only time we're saying this whole din is by tumas tahoim, that there is this potential kula. However, we're dealing with tuma yadua, then 3 of them are tame, which the Mafar says, which means not only truma, but also since someone knew about it, the din is also there's no din of tumas tahoim to be mataher by Pesach and by Nazir, when again it was a tuma yadua. The ezuhi tumas hatahoim, so similar to what we said before. Kol she'en makir echad b'sayf oilam, so no one knew about it. Makir echad b'sayf oilam ezu tumas tahoim. People did know about it, then that's not tumas tahoim. Hayatamoin b'teven or b'srayris. So it gives an example. Let's say the body was buried in straw or rocks. Harizu tumas hatahoim. Okay, because it's concealed. However, biyamim, if it's in the water, biyamim, that actually means referring to the day. Avol yamim va'feila, okay. Va'feila uvan kiki hatzaloyim. If let's say it's just dark, you're in a dark cave, or it's just dark outside, but the mace is still really in front of you. If let's say there's holes where the rocks are, so even though it's covered up with rocks, but there's a lot of gaps, so that's not considered tumas tahoim because it's something which you could see. By the way, the only time we say this, says the Mefarish, shehutra tumas hatahoim tumas meis bovad avol edin zav zavolo. This whole heter is only when it comes to tumas mace, which is halach moshe Sinai, but nowhere else. We're going to stop there, but let's see question TB9, which I got completely wrong. Let's see. Nitma hanazir betumas hatahoim. So if you have a Nazir became Tami Tumas Lahayim, Eino Soiser. So we say it's not Soiser. When did he know that he became Tameh? So either according to the Rabbanon, Acher Zrikas Damim, or according to Rabbi Lezer, Acher Giluach Adkan.